This is a loaded topic, not only for the unbelievable anguish that the individual person is experiencing that has them thinking that the only way out is to commit. The second thing that's equally hurtful, and even more so, is the aftermath that's left with the people who actually love and care for that individual who has departed in such a traumatic way. Over our moment together, I'm going to break down 6 or 7 reasons why it's an increased risk for an individual to go through this experience. The second thing I'm going to do is actually add in some interesting twist of what can be done differently. And third, I'll break down a few examples of what you can do in order to, if you're even thinking about this, recognize that there are other options and perhaps give you the tools to be able to look at your life in a different way and move on to live a robust, flexible, marvelous, amazing life. So, why do people consider suicide? The first and foremost are mental illnesses. Believe it or not, this is the most common reason. Now, mental illness could be different things to different people, so that's why I'm going to break it down real quick. The most thing that people are familiar with are things like being bipolar or schizophrenic or perhaps even borderline. To an extent, it can affect people who have eating disorders. But did you know that one of the latest concerns that is going out in the psychological society is anxiety disorders? And anxiety disorders, for me, is a very interesting topic because anxiety comes in a course. It comes in a steps of things that you experience every single day as a person. Whenever you have a challenge before you, you elicit fear. And from that fear comes emotions and comes thoughts. Just because you have emotions and thoughts doesn't mean you need to engage in that. And not everybody's aware of that. But once you learn that, it does give you that power. It gives you the tool to be able to recognize, just because I'm feeling a certain kind of way, and just because our thoughts are coming in, does not mean that I have to engage. What happens in the sequence of a challenge that is not broken down, it is not addressed and assessed in the way that you can look at, this is my challenge, this is the reason why I have the challenge, this is what I want, and then take the steps to move forward. If you are the type of person that don't understand or have never heard of that sequence that helps you to each and every single time get from where you are to where you want to be, life can be a sequence of super overwhelming moments. And when you're inundated with this over and over and over again, along with recognizing that with every single action, there's an equal and greater reaction. So if there's something that you are not addressing and you don't address it for a long period of time, there's going to be symptoms that arise. And from those symptoms, when you're not dealing with the symptoms or the challenge, then there's going to be consequences. So this is what I mean, that for every action, there's an equal and greater reaction, which leads to a consequence. From there, what happens to each individual that's experienced that overwhelming sense, when you're in that state, you end up becoming anxious because all of your neurotransmitter and synapses, they're just shooting off all the time, waiting to, when are we going to solve this? We're in this heightened stress, constant heightened stress situation. What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this? So that we can move on to, quite honestly, address whatever the next challenge or situation is. So when you're in this heightened state where you have a challenge that's not being processed and worked through, then you're dealing through the symptoms of not dealing with the challenge and the consequences, your anxiety increases. What happens now in our everyday culture is that you take a pill, and that pill just numbs you out, so you don't really feel the thoughts and the emotions that are coming up that are just letting you know that there's a situation here that's important for us to break down. And when you have that, then you're not as able to be able to break down what's in front of you. That's why it's super important in any course of treatment that you have, that even if you are taking medication, to always have cognitive behavior therapy, because cognitive behavior therapy allows you to understand why are you where you are and what you can do differently as you move forward. It's paramount and instrumental. And I got to tell you, I didn't learn about this until my 30s, and I'm 54 at the point of this video, which is why I just focus so much on helping each and every single one of you be able to understand that you are in complete control and you have all the power in your beautiful, essential being to be able to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And if you don't, it's up to you to be accountable and responsible to yourself to learn those skills, to reach out to other people that can help you learn those skills, because everything that you do in your life is a skill, and skills are meant to be learned and not always mastered, but get to the point where you understand why you do the things that you do or why you don't do the things that you do to move on. And that adds to that incredible, overwhelming, and overbearing sense of anxiety that so many people in this world actually experience. So when you look at it like that, when you have these insurmountable aspects of a challenge that is just daunting and overwhelming, and you're thinking about it all the time, and because you're thinking about it all the time and you recognize that there's a challenge that's not being met, and then you have symptoms or consequences that are continuing to pile up, it's understandable why people become depressed, because it's so overwhelming, you just don't know what to do next. That's a breakdown of what happens when you have an anxiety disorder and where it comes from. That's the breakdown. And this is why having a video like this is so important, because it gives you the information that you need in order to recognize, this is what an anxiety disorder, and this is where it comes from, and what do I do next? Which ties right into when we understand what are the most common reasons for mental illness. And you have schizophrenia, which we're familiar with, borderline eating disorders, where you're bipolar. All of those things are biochemical in some sense, and in other senses it's also a way of controlling yourself in such a way that you feel completely out of control because of the challenge that you find yourself in. So anxiety disorders is also part of that. Did you know that traumatic stress is also part of the reason why people feel so hopeless and so helpless, that the only thing that they see in order to get out of the situation is to do something so horrific to themselves? Traumatic stress can be something you have experienced either in childhood. It could be sexual abuse. It could be rape. It could be physical abuse. It could be mental abuse, of course, mental emotional abuse. And what has happened throughout all of history, but definitely something that's in the forefront now, is war trauma. Of course, with war trauma, especially in men, because they're experiencing and seeing the worst of men, what men can do to other men. And of course, the men and women that are in our military, that are here protecting our freedoms all over the world, experience this war trauma. Also, the people who are in the homes or living in the streets every single day that are dealing with the aftermath of not feeling safe within their home environment, within themselves, within their immediate neighborhood, or in their country. All of this prolonged stress can elicit this overwhelming sense of there's nothing else I can do. And this is how that individual chooses to deal with it. Did you know that also PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, is something that affects individuals that are in this prolonged anxious state, that has them in this depressed state because they can't see another way out? So with post-traumatic stress disorder, it also raises the risk of depression because of this ongoing trauma that's causing feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. And it leads to such severe depression when it's not treated. And you know, when you look at Maslow's law of that triangle, the basic things that we need as humans to be able to feel safe is not only our home environment and having food and water, shelter and food and water and resources to be able to live in a certain kind of way. If those things aren't met, it makes so much sense why that's one layer of depression or anxiety disorder. And that's what PTSD is that you are reliving a traumatic disorder, a traumatic moment, pardon me. You're reliving a traumatic moment. So when you're busy being busy, you don't think about the things that are happening. But the moment that you lay down your head, as someone from the military does that comes back after war and they're home with their family and they're out in the day and they have nothing to do, of course what you're thinking about is what you have experienced, and it becomes so overwhelming and it seems so real because you can't escape it. And this is something that elicits so much stress and so much anxiety. So there are treatments that can be used to help an individual who is going through post-traumatic stress disorder, or someone who's dealing with war trauma, or someone that's dealing with rape or physical and mental abuse or sexual abuse, especially in childhood or through any time in the life. It affects every single aspect of your life, especially when you don't have the resources or you don't have the wherewithal to get the type of mental health help to be able to assist you in breaking down what it is that you're feeling, what are your thoughts about this, what are the challenges that are rising from you in this moment, not only because you're thinking about the past, but also how does it impact your everyday life. It's a big thing to break down, and having the tools to be able to do that is so important in being able to master your immediate self and your environment. And this is why so many people do consider suicide, because they don't have the information to be able to logically deal with the overwhelming emotional aspects that are overwhelming and just taking over every aspect of their life, so that their thoughts are only focused on the experience that they have. So sometimes in these severe issues and these severe depressive states, in depression, it can make you feel these high levels, like I just said, of emotional pain and loss of hope. It also is making the individual see that there is no other way to get out of that. They can't find relief in any other aspect of their life. And although as a family member or a friend or a colleague, or even a social worker, or as a therapist, a psychologist, a life coach, you can see that the individual is suffering and say, hey, there are other options. In those specific moments, the person cannot hear and they can't see anything else. So although for you, it might be easy to go, but oh my God, all you got to do is do this and this and this. For example, people that are bullied. When you're bullied at school and you're bullied at work and you're bullied even in your home environment, 100% a bully is being bullied or has been bullied, and they just project that onto the next person in front of them, the person in the more weaker state, right? And this is a fact. The thing when it comes to, for example, we're seeing this in the news all the time, where kids are so overwhelmed and they feel so impacted by this every day of, I'm being bullied, and you're telling your teachers and you're doing all the things, and this still happens, and people are coming out and they're grabbing guns because they're so overwhelmed and they're so inundated with this sense of helplessness and hopelessness, that the only way they can see a way out is to take themselves out and the other people around them that perhaps have caused them harm or just there for collateral damage. And again, completely inappropriate and not a good situation in any way whatsoever. Not only for the individual that is just overwhelmed and completely overridden their emotions and their thoughts about the excruciating challenge that they're experiencing, but also in how it affects the people that are around them afterwards. So now that we've discussed why do people consider suicide, and understanding that not only is it mental illness, which is the most common, and we've gone over mental illness and why it increases, mental illness and how it increases the risk for helplessness and hopelessness, for things that we things that we have discussed really quickly, which is traumatic stress, right? Childhood sexual abuse or rape or physical abuse, war trauma, anything relating to post-traumatic stress disorder, which is the next level after experiencing something like this, when you have not had the time or the resources or the ability to break down why these situations happen and what do you do moving forward, and recognizing that suicide, yes, the person that's facing these social and physical challenges, right? Part of sometimes people who are considering this way of leaving this state because they feel hopeless and helpless is that they feel like a burden. It could be somebody who's really ill, who has cancer, and they think that they're going to drain the family's resources, and this happens quite often, that they figure by committing and they will no longer be a burden to the family. It could also be someone who's in chronic pain, someone who's been in a car accident, or someone who's been in a diving accident, or someone who has done something to their body, and the long-term effect is that they have chronic pain. You know what it feels like when you stub your toe in the middle of the night when you hit the corner of the bed. Imagine having that kind of excruciating pain every single day. And even if you're taking a medication to be able to minimize the pain, then you also have the consequences of dealing with taking a high narcotic for pain management. And that's also a way that people feel they cannot deal with their life situations, because they do feel helpless and they feel hopeless and they don't see another way out. And what happens to a lot of people when they do get depressed to that extent is also social isolation, right? So if you don't know how to make friends and have conversations with people, then you're going to be alone a lot. So you could be the person that gets up every day and you go to work and you do your job and you go and do takeout, or you make food at home, and then you come home and there's nothing, and you do this over and over and over and over again. It's completely understandable to recognize why individuals choose another way out, because they don't see anything else. And what you and I are going to talk about in this stage of the conversation now is, what can you do differently? And why do individuals get to this state in their life? The first one, when you think about it, even in your everyday challenges, not to the extreme where someone chooses to depart in such a traumatic and tragic way. But when you have a breakup with a boyfriend or a husband, you can understand the depression, that depressive state that you're in. And you're there for a prolonged period of time, and you have friends that love you and support you, and family members that love you and support you, and they listen to you and they talk to you and they help you work through the messiness that is coming out of a relationship. You understand that. And most people, when they are in that state, they're completely looking down. They're only looking at the situation or the challenge that they're in. And this is what happens when you feel hopeless and helpless, because you can't see another way out, because all you're doing is looking at that specific challenge. All the focus that you have is on that specific challenge. And then not only the challenge, you also have the symptoms or the consequences of only focusing on the challenge. Because again, with every single action, there's an equal or greater reaction. And that's what actions and consequences mean. Whatever you do, whatever you're experiencing, when you choose not to deal with it, then you're not only going to have to deal with the challenge itself, but also all the symptoms that come in from not dealing with it, and then the consequences. And that's just so overwhelming. So what a great tip for you as you're going out here and living your marvelous life is to look up. Look up from the situation. If you look at me in this room right now, I'm the challenge. Let's just pretend. If you look at me, I'm the challenge. However, when you look up, I'm in this entire room. So when you look at your life as a challenge and you go, I could look at myself and look at, oh my God, this dress has pink and burgundy and blue and yellow and gold and it's a long midi dress. You can think of all these things because you're only focused on the dress. You're only focused on the challenge. You're only focused on you in this specific moment. But then when you look up, it gives you a breath of awareness to go, oh my goodness, okay, so I am experiencing a challenge in my life at this moment. But when I look at my life, like this room, where you have friends, you have family, you are employed, you do have social moments with your friends and family, you exercise, you eat healthy, you're out and you're doing things, then it doesn't seem like the challenge is so big because you've been able to look up and look at it from the perspective of, okay, this is a moment that I'm experiencing, that you're experiencing in this moment. It's just a moment in relation to everything else you have going on. So just by looking up in the middle of your challenge, it gives you a little bit of a purview, a little bit of a distance to go, okay, there's more to my life than this exact moment. And the second thing that it's so important to recognize is that when you're in the middle of the challenge, regardless of the emotions and the thoughts that are coming up, because again, something that I talk about all the time in this channel is our thoughts and our emotions are just going, mira, mira, do you see that there's something right here that we need to be figuring it out and we're not figuring it out and it's becoming a little moment? That's all they're doing. So just because you have emotions and thoughts doesn't mean you need to engage. It's important that you go, why am I having these emotions and thoughts around this challenge? What is it about this situation that has you feeling the way that you're feeling? That's the most important thing. It's all about self-reflection. How do you break this situation down and recognize I'm in the middle of this challenge? What can I do to be able to get me from where I am to where I want to be? And it's just, I know it seems really simple because it is really simple, but it does take quite a bit of action and courage and discipline and consistency. Because let's be honest, the challenge is there because you're afraid of something, whatever it is. So that's why it's important to ask yourself, why am I afraid of this challenge in front of me? When you break it down into smaller spots, it doesn't seem so big, like your beautiful life. There's one aspect of your life that isn't working, but the rest of your life is. So when you look at it like that, you're like, this isn't working, but these other parts are. So let me figure out why this isn't working. And then recognize what are the questions and the decisions that you made to get yourself in this challenge. And then once you recognize what you did, then go, okay, where is it that I want to go from this challenge? It could be losing weight. I just did this a little while ago, right? 5'10", I'm a tall, fantastic woman. I was hitting 198, which I can carry, but just because I can carry it doesn't mean that it makes me feel good in my body, because I'm a good 170, 172 is perfect for me. And those are 28 pounds that I lost over the period of 6 months. It took a lot of work, it took discipline, it took consistency. But you know what? It didn't take me a day to gain those almost 30 pounds. So of course it makes sense to recognize it's not going to take me a day to lose it. So understanding why did I gain the weight? Well, because I was a little bit in my feelings and emotions. And although I could deal with some of it, other parts I didn't, and I couldn't, and I chose not to. So it put me in that situation. And I'm not saying being overweight is anything in relation to someone who's incredibly depressed, but I can say this. Part of being depressed is numbing yourself. And if you don't have medications to be able to numb yourself, these are the common 5 ways in which people use food, which is what I do. You use food in order to soothe yourself and comfort yourself during challenging moments. Alcohol, drinking alcohol is such a beautiful way to escape that challenge or situation that you're in, as is eating. It's also gambling. Gambling elicits these kind of dopamine, and it's kicking in and kind of gets you away from what's going on. It's an escape mechanism, as well as shopping, as well as watching TV or Instagram, social media for hours at a time every single day, as is drugs, alcohol, and any kind of promiscuous activities that's preventing you or just helping you escape from that situation that you don't want to really deal with. So the question of the hour, if you see or if you're experiencing this yourself, reach out. You're not alone. There are people around you that are willing to help. Reach out. Talk to a counselor. Talk to a therapist. Because whatever it is that you're going through, I promise you, is manageable. It'll take a lot of work from you because, of course, there's fear. Of course, that challenge seems so overwhelming. And all of the symptoms that arise from not dealing with that challenge can become so overwhelming. And I know one can say, even in the course of someone who has been sexually abused or physically and mentally abused, yeah, those are huge extremes. And there's also counselors and therapists that you can take the time to go through the fears that you have, to be able to discuss what has happened to you at length, and recognize that in those situations, it's a dominant force. It has nothing to do with you in most situations. It's something that individual doesn't know how to break down and process, and they're just projecting it and taking that on you. And I'm not saying that it's okay, because I'm not. But what I am alluding to is that there's always a way out. So it's important to look up from the challenge and get the bigger picture. And if you can't look up from the challenge to get the bigger picture, then reach out and get help from a suicide hotline, from your friends, from your family, from a therapist, a counselor. Talk to someone that's going to help you to see the bigger picture and direct you to other resources that will help you in understanding that there's something greater and that you are so valuable to the people who are around you. So instead of considering a permanent state of removing yourself from society, think about how you can talk to another person, how you can put yourself in a position where you can actually share what's going on or what your experiences is. And it's tough, and you're afraid, and your ego sometimes talks to you and tells you you're not going to be doing this. I mean, it's embarrassing, and people don't want to listen to you, and they're not interested. It's not true. Ego always comes out of fear. So understanding that the sequence of anything that we deal with in life is that there's a challenge, and whatever the challenge is in front of you, there's always going to be some kind of thought, and there's always going to be some kind of emotions, and those thoughts and emotions are just there to let you go, do you see that there's something right here that is time for you to break down, and let's move forward from this. And if you don't know how, it's a skill. So moving forward in this beautiful, marvelous life that you have, I trust that some of this information has helped you to have a bigger and broader understanding of why some people consider choosing as a way of stepping out of their life. This is some of the backstory that these individual people are dealing with, as well as the individuals who are here in the aftermath also are experiencing the traumatic loss of the person that has left in such a dramatically inconceivable way. Talk to people. Get yourself out there. Get yourself in connection with others so that you're not alone. Speaking to grief counselors, speaking with psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists that can help you to be able to recognize why you're in the situation you're in and to do something about it is the greatest gift you can give to yourself. Every Thursday, I drop a new video. I trust that the information that you receive today helps you in some way. If there's something that you want to talk more about or you want to expand on this topic or any other topic, just comment below. You can always go to my website at vanessaleecurley.com. You can always drop me a little email and let me know if there's something else that you want to talk about on this channel that I can do some research on and bring it out. And of course, give you a shout out because it was your idea. And this whole channel is about helping each and every one of us be able to understand that everything in our life is on the other end of walking through the fear, breaking down the challenge, and understanding that in order for me to get from here to there, what are the steps I need to take? Much love.